Are you looking for a podcast where you can hear from real people regarding their real dental drama? If so, then you've come to the right place. Join hosts Bethany and Dr. Kuba as we dive into the solutions we've created and the mistakes we've made while managing dental drama. Let's get started. Happy anniversary. Can you believe?
Me?
I know, well, to managing dental drama.
2 years?
Yes.
Have we had that much to talk about?
We have. Can you believe? We're about to start this is episode 1 of season 3.
Wow. Okay. That's exciting. Congratulations, cool? Friend. Congratulations. Cheers.
We're still here. We're still here every Monday. Can you believe it? Most people kind of fizzle off at this point, and here we are, the dum-dums that are still...
Do we still have listeners?
We do.
Or they're just like the two hanging on?
No.
I'm one of them.
My dad and your dad.
Your dad and me.
Yeah. No, actually, we've continued to grow. We've got, I know in last year's anniversary episode, we were able to dig into all the various countries that we're pulling from. We're still pulling from those countries. Texas is still our number 1 listening state, kind of from all over. But
why do you think that is? Is that because most of your clients are in Texas, or?
I'm not really sure.
Okay.
I don't know. I would say 80% of my clients are in Texas, so that could be part of it. But what's interesting is there's this battle between Texas and the state of Washington. So on certain episodes, Texas wins with how many listeners there are, and then on certain episodes, Washington wins.
And how many any idea, like percentage-wise, do you have like a client in Washington?
1 client in Washington.
Okay.
So in that I'm like, what? Where are all these Washington people coming from? But somehow
struck a chord.
It struck a chord with somebody. And so Texas and Washington are battling it out for our favorite states.
All right, you 48 other states, come on now.
I know. Get in line for this. So, but it's been neat to watch it grow and just people going back and listening to episodes. So I think you and I, once we do an episode, we're kind of like, all right, moving on into the next one. And very rarely do we go back and kind of re-listen to things, but it looks like people kind of go back and topically find things that matter to them, or they hit a point where they're like, ooh, is there any podcast on this subject matter? And they're going back and listening or finding those episodes, which I feel good about because I think we've really tried over these last couple years to create a variety of topics based on the needs that have arisen in the moment, and to know that an episode from 2 years ago is still being downloaded is really cool.
It's still relevant.
Which is pretty neat.
Well, I know we've had it, maybe twice this summer alone that got a random text from, a colleague that I didn't even know you knew. Mm-hmm. And I don't think you knew that I knew her. Mm-hmm. And she texted us both and was just like, oh my God, I just learned that y'all had a podcast and I'm hooked and it's been so helpful. And, to me, that's exciting because she's somebody who I really respect and I really feel like she's got a good practice, longevity, and all of that. So the fact that she's listening and feeling like she can, at the very least, maybe not, who knows what takeaways she's getting, but at least commiserate with us going, it's not just me.
Yeah. Yeah, almost every week I've got a client that's like, oh, I really loved your episode on this. I learned that was super relevant. And so I feel like it's fun for us. I still look forward to it, even coming in today. I'm
Same.
like, I enjoy our time. And then to hear that it's, impacting people is always like, oh, that feels good. So yes, happy anniversary to us.
Well, happy
Season
anniversary
3.
to you. Yes.
Way to go.
Yes.
We've arrived. I think we're official now. So I wanted to spend today's episode allowing listeners to kind of get to know us, but through questions that might still be applicable.
Helpful.
Yeah, to them. So it'll kind of kill 2 birds with 1 stone, because I always like for this episode to be a little bit different. So I've got a question for you, and then you can ask a question. We don't really know what we're going to ask each other, do we?
No, because you came in here and you said it's our I'm going to have questions for you for this different episode. And
Yeah.
then now I see what you mean by different. And now I'm like, questions.
Oh, no. Get ready. We're going to go deep today. No, my first question for you is, okay, so you've been private practice owner now for...
Since 13 years?
13 years.
Yeah.
So
Which is just ridiculous.
Isn't
Like,
that
that
crazy?
sounds ridiculous, but okay.
This is exciting, right? So 13 years. So if you were to go back in time, so you're you now, and you were have the opportunity to go back and tell yourself 13 years ago something, anything, multiple things that you feel like would be helpful to you.
Don't do it. Run. Run. Get out of here.
That's just it. It solves it, right?
That was it.
Okay, that's not good.
No. Okay. What would I tell myself?
What would you tell yourself? Yep.
I think, and I know I've talked about this on multiple podcasts, but I still laugh. My colleague of mine and I were walking yesterday, and I alluded to this. This came up in my mind about personalities, and I, just how I never really thought personalities were important. I was like, whatever, my personality, your personality, who cares? Like, we're here to do dentistry. What does it matter? Or you were the one person who showed up to the interview and responded to the post. I hired you. It doesn't matter what your personality is. And I think if I had known sooner how the personalities, knowing the personalities helps you be strategic. Mm-hmm. So not that I'm only hiring a certain type of personality. So that's not it at all. It's how can I be strategic with this type of personality so that instead of saying something this way, I could say it this way and be completely impactful, or I could do it just this other way that's not taking into account their personality, and it either have no effect or have a detrimental effect. And I think it took me years until you came along. So it took me years where I was just botching things up right and left that I shudder to go back and think now, like, so for example, let me give a for example.
Yeah.
So there was an employee that when I was an associate in a previous practice, she was an assistant there. And every time we needed to give her corrective action, my boss would not pull her aside. He was too, conflict averse. So he'd pull all the RDAs aside. And we'll be like, hey guys, I really need y'all to, show up on time and set up the operatories before patient care because blah, 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 blah. Well, 3 of the 4 RDAs were doing exactly that. It was this one that wasn't. Well, then after the meeting, I would have one of the other RDAs be like, man, I thought I was doing right, but maybe I just need to come earlier, and maybe I'm not setting everything up. Maybe that's not what he meant. Maybe I need to go ahead and set up the next 5 trays for the day, and I'm only setting up the first 3. Like, I'll get better. And then you had this one that was just like, somebody do, and show up late the next day, and the tray's still not set up. She just did not think that she was the one being talked to. So my thought on that was, dude, when I start my practice, I'm not going to be a sugarcoater. I'm going to be very direct. Funny enough, that was the very employee that she ended up moving closer to my practice and asked for a job. And I was like, bah, she's the one who, is the lazy one who won't. And she's the one who doesn't recognize that she's the one being talked to. And I was like, but that's okay, because I've got this. I'm not going to sugarcoat. I'm just going to be very direct with her. Hey, what are you doing? You need to show up on time. You need to have this tray set up. You need to this. And in the end, it, she worked with me for 2 or 3 years. Come to find later, like, I really hurt her feelings many times. And I really, left a lasting impression of, how terrible she was and how terrible. And I'm just like, I didn't think I was doing that. I was basically just telling you very clearly, you need to show up.
Yeah.
Don't be lazy. It comes across as laziness. And I don't need lazy people on my team. You need to come up and set this up, right?
Clear.
Well,
You were being clear.
I was being clear. Well, I was being an idiot, because if I had looked at her personality, I would have seen that, she is one who needed probably checklists. Mm-hmm. Very smart girl. So what else am I to assume? I knew you were smart, but I'm going to assume you're lazy then. Mm-hmm. And I'm not going to take laziness on my team. Mm-hmm. And so did it spur her to show up on time and set up? No. Like so his sugarcoating way had no impact on her, and my meanness had no impact on her, my clear, direct. But if I had recognized her personality was, she's kind of forgetful, she gets sidetracked easily, she's really good at, patient care and being bubbly. So I guess she was more of the sanguine, right? But I didn't recognize that. And so to me, it was me telling her what she needed to do. She knew that. It's just, I needed to approach it in a way of, hey, we're going to have checklists here, or we're going to go, this is the order I need you to go in. Mm-hmm. And if I just given her the order, she would have done it. So that's what I mean by personalities. I wish I had caught on to the strategy of personalities so much easier. So then you've got the sanguine. Now, if I approach that same way with the choleric and I come up and I'm like, okay, this is the order we're going to go in, I'm going to piss off a choleric.
Absolutely.
Because they're like, I know what order we need to go in. Mm-hmm. So then for me with the choleric, I would be going, hey, we're still having issues with the trays being set up. What do you think is the option that would help? Do I need to tell you in advance what I'm expecting with these trays? Or do you need somebody else to set them up? Or do you need... No, what I need is blah, 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 blah. Oh, okay, great. So you got it? Great. You know what I mean? So it's just different personality types that I think you could be more strategic with. And I did not pay attention to that whatsoever. So I think that's definitely something I would tell myself. I used to scoff at it. I thought it was stupid.
Yeah.
That's how backwards I was on it. And I would snicker at it going... And now I'm like, it's all about strategy. Do you want to just keep hitting your head against the wall, or do you want to have more tools in your tool belt?
Exactly.
And not put forth so much effort if you pick the right tool?
Well, and it would have saved you time and then also made your message more effective. So to have all those years of kind of banging your head against the wall, I think I'm being helpful because I'm being super direct, but it's the same directness towards any employee. There's like you said, a science, an art, a strategy for customizing your messaging based on the people. So,
and I used to kind of go, why should I have to customize my message? You should customize to me. You should figure out my personality because you're the one who wants a job here. Unfortunately, it doesn't work that way. I should have told myself that too, that I am not the boss of anything. I am the chump. I am the number one chump. And I think if you recognize that before you get started, that would save you a lot of heartache.
So true. So true. It kind of reminds me of how you talk about how you're going to be a parent. Oh, I'm going to be this type of parent. I'm not going to do this. I'm going to do this. It's just going to be in our heads. It's perfect. And then the child comes along and you're like, I have no control. They are in control of this. And I'm just going to keep it fed. That's very similar to practice ownership. You're going to have to bend. That baby's going to cry a lot, and you're just going to have to.
And you can't just say, stop crying.
No.
They're not listening. Now, would it be better if I just didn't have the baby there? Too late. The baby's here. The practice is here. It's here. You did it.
So I guess that would be a follow-up question, because we joke about this a lot. But going back 13 years ago, knowing what you know now, and I know you hate these kind of questions. Anytime I ask you, you're like, stop asking me stupid questions. But I'm going to ask you a stupid question live on air.
Great.
Yes. So going back 13 years ago, knowing all of the plus sides of practice ownership, all of the downsides of practice ownership, do you feel like you would have walked the same path of practice ownership? And if not, what would you have done instead?
That's hard to answer because you don't know what you don't know, right? So why did I start a practice? It's not like I had this burning desire to be the owner and I had a vision for what I wanted from my practice, and I would put a plant over here and I would have a pink room over there. No, I actually didn't want a practice because I saw all the headaches. So for me, it was about starting a family and not wanting to raise a family in the town I was practicing in, that I was associating in. So I think for me going back, I start going, well, could I have made a different decision? Could I have approached that gentleman and said, hey, or I was going to say partner in, but why would I even partner in? Could I just be a long-time associate here? Could we have made a compromise where I was living closer but maybe still having somewhat of a commute? Could I have made that work? And I do think about that at times. Could I have made that work? And I'll never know the answer to that. So then I'm stuck with going, okay, well, but I've had this practice, and as much as I like to poo-poo on it, like, has it done a lot of really good things for me? And it has. It has.
Well, not only for you, but I think also for the community, also for your patients, also for your team, so.
But then I say that, negative reality Rena, negative Nelly, whatever. I'm like, but couldn't I have had the same thing there?
Yeah.
You know what? And could it have been better if at least for my family personal life, could it have been better if I wasn't dealing with all the headaches that I'm dealing with?
Right.
And that's, my dear friend, my colleague that helps me, she's always telling me, she's like, I really do think you need to get out, because the toll it takes on you physically and mentally, and it just keeps draining you. But she's never been a practice owner. So she can't speak to the rewards you get financially and otherwise too. So she makes an impact, but it's a muted impact. So, I don't know. I don't know how to answer that question. Would I do it again? I don't know.
Yeah.
Because I'm still struggling with, should I sell?
Yeah.
And I found myself going, no, but is that a stupid decision financially? And I know you say it's not, and it depends on who you ask, I suppose. But to me, at the end of the day, I finally just realized, at least at this point in time, I need control over my own schedule and over everything. I guess I didn't realize I was such a controlling person. I guess my husband's like, duh.
You're just now realizing this?
Yes, but I don't like the word controlling. I prefer the word spoiled. I'm spoiled, and I want things my way. And I make fun of this generation for wanting things their way, and lo and behold, I am one of them. I want to be off this day. I want to do that. I don't want to do this. And I think, again, but 13 years ago, I wasn't that way, because I was a guest in somebody else's home. And so I tailored myself to whatever, I was there to serve his community and serve his practice. So I was there to serve you, and you tell me what you need. And I did it very well. So, but now I can't see myself doing that, because now I've had a taste of having it my way.
Right.
So I don't know how to answer that question.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I think I imagined that you would answer it very similarly to that.
Okay.
So, but I think the thought process is important for people to know, not only about you, but even as they grapple with some of the same thoughts and feelings about practice ownership, or should I buy a practice, or, the 13 years in, these are the thoughts. And I think that's important to know. So,
okay.
So one of my other questions that I had for you was, knowing what you know now about managing people, your staff, and I know personalities are a huge part of that, but are there ways that you've learned to handle the stress of managing people, managing patients, managing parents? Like, how do you cope with some of that?
A ton of Valium every day. Zoloft, Ambien. Just take my cocktail in the morning. Shot of tequila. That's how I'm managing. I think it's just so back to personalities. I think learning about all of that and learning to be more strategic, it's actually kind of fun then, because it makes it a challenge. It's like, how am I going to get you to do what I need you to do? And how am I going to tailor this? Kind of like we do with our patients. I need you to sign on this treatment plan because your kid's in pain. How am I going to talk to you about this versus talk to that other parent about this? Because I can't give you both the same spiel, because you both are very different people. And again, that's one thing in the practice that I was missing for so many years, because I had one spiel. And, looking back on it now, I'm like, that's quite foolish. Like it's pretty dumb. So the personalities are everything. And I think, so your question to me was, how do I cope with all of this? I think, just trying to see it as a different personality challenge, and trying to go, okay, let me see which tools I have that I can apply to this versus apply to that.
Almost like a brain teaser, like, okay, this is a new, rather than each challenge becomes like this thing this overwhelming thing that can't be solved. It's a mountain you can't climb. It's like, okay, this is a new challenge. How am I going to put all of this creativeness together to try to solve this?
And I will say, probably my still gut instinctual reaction is, overwhelmed, God. And then I'm like, stop, you've done this before. And like, don't make this mountain out of it. Like really look at it, like, and dig a little deeper, dust the cobwebs off. Because I think that's another thing that a lot of people assume they know. But I think digging deeper and going, if I'm really looking at human nature and or looking at, Cindy's nature. In the past, Cindy has said this, and in the past, Cindy has done that. And then knowing her personality with this type of situation, where do I predict she's going to fall, given this is how she's fallen before? And I feel like I've grown a lot there, and I feel like I've gotten so much better. You tell me, because you're the one who's helped me kind of get there, because then you and I can kind of banter now where, you might say, well, let's do this. And I'm like, you know what? But maybe she reacted this way last time. Do you think that's really going to be helpful? And you're like, you know what? You're right. Or you'll say something because I haven't told you that. I'm like, but wait, this just happened yesterday. And you're like, well, why are you just now telling me that? Like, this is how this would play out. Yeah. But I think in the past, years before, I wouldn't even pick up on those smoke signals or pick up on those clues. Yeah. So really getting to know your people, including your patients and, your team, like really, really trying to get to know them. And I think my associate's there right now where he's just 2 years in, and he thinks I'm crazy. Like, he thinks that I'm just this drama queen, batshit crazy. Like, he's like, why are you, that person just said this, that doesn't mean anything. And I'm like, but it does. And so, yes, am I a little maybe over the top with it? But I think he's way under the top with it. You know what I mean? I'm like, oh, kiddo, you've not learned that's actually, file that nugget away for later. Mm-hmm. Because when you're trying to predict their behavior later, you're going to have to go back to these nuggets. And so if you've not armed yourself with nuggets, how can you predict behavior, and how can you predict an outcome, and how can you be prepared then for those outcomes? So what was the question again?
So basically, how do you cope with the stress? And it sounds like you've turned that almost into a personal challenge for yourself. And again, it doesn't mean that your default reaction isn't like, oh gosh, but then you have kind of positively talked yourself up to go, you got this, let's solve this. And it's become more of a, not that it's exciting, but you're turning those problems or the stress that come up into challenges.
Well, and honestly, it's me going, hey, Bethany, this. Now, this is what I'm thinking. What are you thinking? If you're like, yeah, I think you're right. Like, I feel like I got an A in math class. Like, the expert has told me I'm on the right track with this. Like, it's a feel good for me there. And it is fun is maybe not the right word, but it's stimulating to maybe go, whoa, wait, not whoa, like really dig down. And this really has kind of 3 elements to it. So what are the 3 things that I can think? So I think that's one thing, is just really getting to know personalities and really trying to predict, reactions and behavior based on that. So it's a lot of psychology, I guess. The other thing I would say that's been paramount, that's been key, that I don't think enough dentists do, and I am going to call y'all out on it. I think y'all are foolish. I don't think seeking counsel happens enough. Or we seek counsel from people we should not be seeking counsel from. Yeah. Oh, well, I talked to my wife about this. I talked to my mother about this. Well, even if your mother is a dentist and your wife's a dentist, it's not the same situation, and y'all are kind of inbreeding your thoughts. You know what I mean? Like, so you need to seek counsel. To me, probably the best decision I've ever made in the history of the practice was working with you. Aww. Second would be like switching to Masus Womble, who's my accounting company, because they approach things a different way and guide me in different ways, that a general accountant couldn't do for me. Mm-hmm. And so I think a lot of people are too cheap. I think they're just going, oh, I've got this, I don't need them. And I just think that that's foolish. I've spent a ton of money on Scheduling Institute. Was every penny worth it? I don't know. But I'm going to say yes, because they showed me how to think different in different areas. Now, again, is anybody showing me something that potentially I couldn't figure out for myself? But I think that's the wrong attitude. They're putting a different spin on it. And I go back and say, does LeBron James fire all of his coaches? Of course not, because there's always a different angle. LeBron's not the same player he was 2 years ago. So for LeBron to continue to do the same exercises he did 2 years ago would be foolish.
Exactly.
So I just think not enough people seek counsel, and I think that's dumb, and I don't know where that comes from. Is it ego to go, I know it all, and I don't need the help? Or is it ego in the other way of going, oh God, I don't want somebody to tell me I'm wrong. I can't cope with that.
Right.
And I think cheapness is a healthy other portion of it.
I do. I think the cost of good counsel is always a barrier, which is sad. But I also think it's effortful.
Yeah.
You know, it's so much
True.
easier to just knee-jerk reaction. Here's what I'm going to do, and deal with the consequences later. I think it's effortful to pause and to go, let me get some weigh in, from this person, or let me ask perspective. We tend to want to solve things quickly and just move on from it. And therefore we just jump in and make decisions, and it's effortful.
And I think the other thing, too, that ties in with that, for example, when I was starting the practice, and several of my colleagues were also starting one at the same time, so we were all kind of like talking to each other. And I know I had several that were like, well, no, we're not sticking to a Patterson or a Shine or a Burkhardt or a Benko. I bought this online, I bought this on eBay, I'm going to buy this here, I'm going to do that there. And looking at me like I was an idiot because I ended up going with Shine and oh, you're paying so much more for the same equipment I got over here. And I said, but some of the advice that I got from those reps really made, so it's an investment, I guess is what I'm saying. And if you're looking at it as, Bethany charges too much, dental compliance charges too much, Henry Shine charges too much, it's an investment in yourself and in the practice, and you're not counting the dollars you're saving. For example, when I went with Shine and something about when we were going to set up our nitrous, and the rep said, well, you could do it that way, but I might suggest in your case you do it this way. I would have never known that. And if I had just bought nitrous off of, whatever site for the cheapest buck and set it up the way that I thought, because I've used nitrous in other offices, the impact of how much that would have cost me down the road. Or chairs. I knew people who were buying cheap chairs somewhere. Well, you're going to pay for that later. So maybe, there are times where you're like, well, I can't afford it right now, but I don't think that's the mindset for most. Most are like, I'm not going to be hoodwinked by a Shine rep. I'm not going to, or even now, for example, I tell so many people, I don't know if she's accepting new clients, but to have another, and then they go and they I don't know, listen to a podcast or two and think that they know everything now. And I'm like, okay, whatever. But even dental compliance and all the things he does for you. Yeah. I'm like, but you're too cheap, and you're questioning, but. And I'm like, I am telling you, it is worth every penny. I don't understand why you think you know everything, oral surgeon who's been practicing for 3 years.
Right.
Because you've already, I'm not an oral surgeon. I didn't go to that much school. I'm not that smart clinically. But business-wise, you certainly have just said about 4 things that make you sound like a fool.
Right.
And you're, for example, anyway, well, I won't talk about all that, but I'm just saying seek counsel is the point.
Well, I think you made a really good statement just then. It's surrounding yourself with experts and investing in those experts. It's going to cost money. If you want good counsel, it's going to cost money. And so when you view yourself as the dentist or as the practice owner, as an expert in all of those categories, oh, I don't need that because I'm the smartest one in the room, so I can make decisions about that. Your expertise is clinically. That's what you were trained to do. The clinical aspect of dentistry. You weren't trained to run a business. You weren't trained to manage people. You weren't trained to financially invest in the appropriate way. You weren't trained in you might have been trained some in compliance type things, but that is certainly that changes yearly. That changes monthly sometimes. So you can't remain an expert on compliance type things. So I think that's where we come back to ego, to assume that you can be an expert in all of those categories is dangerous.
Well, and then what do? We go to our other colleague
Yeah.
Well, what are you doing? Well, why did you do that? Well, can you send me your checklist? Can you send me, what do we know? It's like, talk about the blind leading the blind. Like, we know nothing and we're all feeding off of each other. Or somebody, or you'll say, hey, did you also, are you working with a consultant like a Bethany or a something? No, are you? No. Okay, good. We're good then.
Yeah.
What?
Yeah.
So it's just an odd mindset. And I think it's, I don't know. I don't know what to say about it, because to me, like from the get-go, I was like, there's so much stuff I don't know. And I was never the 4.0. So I know I need to surround myself with people that are smart to make up for my weaknesses, because I am really good at pediatric dentistry.
Yeah.
But that's about where my talents lie. Like that's all where my talents lie. And so I've had to learn and grow. And how am I going to learn it and grow it if I don't invest the time and the money and the effort into learning and growing?
Yeah. I think that's good advice. And it may be that financially, a doctor can only afford a really great CPA firm. Okay, great. Make that your starting point, but then supplement your education on the other things. You don't know how to manage. Assume you don't know how to manage people. Just assume it. Even if you're a naturally good people person, assume that you don't know how to manage people. Okay, what books can you read? What seminars can you go to that are psychology based or management based or personality based? What podcasts can you listen to? So if you can't afford the expertise in other areas, which is valid, then figure out how you can supplement.
And I don't think anybody really does that. A handful.
Yeah.
5% probably. But everybody else is just like, I'm good.
Yeah.
You don't have one? You don't have one? You don't do this? Okay, I'm good.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, I think we should always be challenging ourselves, because really as a practice owner, either you have to be an expert in all of those categories to really do well for yourself, or you have to supplement.
When I'm thinking, like, with all the technology out there, like now we've got an intraoral scanner and we've got new implant system and we've got new materials. And so we're already spending our brain cells trying to learn the clinical and enhance our clinical skill set offerings. How can I have more brain power? And not even just how, why? Why am I trying to be a jack of all trades?
Yeah.
Like, focus on what I'm good at focusing, and then you outsource the rest to help you. And I just don't think enough people, whether it's ego or whatever.
We can't manage all of that well.
Yeah.
To me, unless you're clinically working 1 day a week and you're spending the other 4 or 5 days a week handling the other things, I think it's just time-wise. And I feel like so much of what we talk about is the buck stops with you. You know, the buck stops here. Everything terminates back on the practice owner. And you really don't want clinically, okay, great. Yeah, man that ship. That is your expertise. But you really don't want something tax related to come back on you because you didn't know. You really don't want to mishandle an employee situation and now you've got a lawsuit on your hand because you didn't know. Like, just don't put yourself at risk, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
Risk, and just the common sense of, if I'm trying to handle all of those, the thing that I do best that makes money is clinical. So I want to focus on the clinical, and I'm not going to bother with all the tax and the this and the that, because that is a waste of my talents and time. At the moment, I could make so much more if I was here drilling and figuring out the new intraoral scanner than I am having to stop and, you know, do foolish things on the side, and I can't keep employees because I don't know how to manage people.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah. No, I think that's good advice. I think that's all the questions I had for you.
Okay. I was about to say, my turn. Can I ask you a question?
You can ask me a question.
Okay. So my question to you is, you had the idea for this podcast, I guess, 2-ish years ago, 3 years, whatever the math is on that. I guess we're starting podcast 3. So
it would be, so we finished 2 full years.
Okay.
So we're starting the 3rd year.
So, what did you want out of this podcast, and where do you see this podcast going? Do you think so I guess it's a 3-part question. What did you want? Do you think you got it? Where do you think it's going?
Great question. So I would say what I wanted out of the podcast is I felt like I was having trouble connecting with all of my clients, you know, like, in all honesty, if I were to really think about it, I could talk to every single one of my clients every day and still feel like that wouldn't be enough time. There are so many conversations that I want to have, need to have, would love to be able to have, but I can't, And so to me, this was such a good platform of, oh my gosh, there's so many topics that I want to talk about that now my clients will have access to. They don't have to wait on me to be back in their office a month later or 2 months later to hear this from me. They can access this and get some additional support. So I really saw it more like a value add for my clients. And I was building, this was a year after the pandemic that I started wanting to do this, because I felt like I had all these topics in my head that were just building, but we were still in such of that problem solving mode that I felt like I was never able to tap into all of these additional topics, because every client that I stepped into, it was like, there's still fire, we've got to put it out. And so we were spending so much time on the fire that I was not getting to talk about all the practice management type things that I felt like I really needed to be talking about to accurately support my clients. So I really, honestly, I knew that other people that were not my clients would probably hear the podcast, and but my original intent was I just want to somehow provide extra for my clients, and that's definitely happening. So did we achieve that? I think 90% of my clients are listening to, at least a podcast or two a month, or they're going back and listening to episodes that were really impactful for them.
Or like if they skipped some episodes, but it's like, wait a minute, they did talk about like holiday bonuses, or they did talk about how to retain an employee, and I wasn't needing that back then, so I didn't listen to it because I was fine.
Yeah. But
I know they had something. Let me go back and listen to that and see what nuggets, and then that way take away what you want, and then they can call you separately and say, well, you said this. Do you think this applies in this case? I'm sure you get that happening
so many times. Somebody will reach out and be like, hey, I listened to the podcast on this. So my question is, and it's a very direct question because they've got all this background information from the podcast or from us dialoguing through it. They have a perspective that they didn't have before, and now they can ask a very pointed question, which in a way helps me, right? Because these issues are difficult that we face in dentistry, and so for me to accurately give enough time, information, and all the background thoughts that I have, there's not enough time in the week. And so it benefits me because my client's getting really good information from us dialoguing through it. But then if they do have an additional question for me, that conversation might take 10 minutes rather than an hour and a half, which is hard for me to fit in. So that was my original intent. It's really exciting to, meet up with a client. And I've got one client that's just so sweet, and I travel to him usually every 2 to 3 months, and he's like, I can't tell you how soothing it is just to hear your voice, to hear Dr. Kuba's perspective. Like every week, every Monday, I look forward to it. Like I can't wait for the next podcast to drop because it's just such a comfort to me. And I'm like, oh, like that makes it all worth it. That they feel connected to us and they don't feel alone. They feel like there's, people on the other end of the mic that are relating to their scenario. So I would say I've accomplished that. What has been surprising to me is how many people are listening to it that I don't know who they are. I don't know what their situation is.
They're all the people I paid to say, hey, could you...
Like, please listen every week, please. That's been really surprising. I didn't expect it to grow like it has. And even to see, you go on to Apple Podcasts and you search dental, and we're usually in the top, 1 to 4. And I'm like, there's podcasts that have been there for years and we're kind of up in that ranking. It's surprising to me every time.
Why do you think that is?
I don't know. I think part of my intent and what we talked about before we started the podcast, there was a lot of good podcasts out there, and there are really good. They're just different. They're, hey, let's talk about this particular product. Let's talk about this dental technique. And here's a rep that will come in and talk to you about it. And I think that's super helpful. But I just realized that so much of that isn't really getting down to the heart of practice ownership and dentistry. And there is a lot of heart in it. The technique is, yeah, for sure. Every seminar you go to, most of the podcasts you listen to, technique. And I think that's super important. But there's also this emotional, mental, psychological side that just is not talked about. And it's almost like it's hidden, literally, in the closet. Like, let's leave that out, and let's not talk about that, or let's pretend like I'm not having those emotions. And to me, that's unhealthy. Like, we need to talk about these things and recognize the stress of it all. And I think that's what we do.
Well, I remember, I think season 1 of the podcast, and I got a handwritten letter by one of your clients, and she kind of said, when I go to continuing education classes and say it's about veneers, and of course the presenter is going to show their best cases and talk about stuff like that, and she's like, I felt like I was this terrible dentist because my results weren't like that. Mm-hmm. And that she had to remind herself that they're not going to show you the run-of-the-mill or troubleshoot. And I remember always feeling that way too, going, okay, I know what a good veneer case looks like. My question is, how'd you get there?
Yeah.
And a lot of times that's what's missing in a lot of these technique presentations, mm-hmm. is the real nitty-gritty, like, dummy it down to like, okay, when you say the oven needs to be at 350, like, how do I do that? Okay, I push bake, and then I toggle it, and then I hit start. Oh, okay, that's what you're talking about. You know what I mean? Like, some of us just need it at that very, like,
basic
level. And so I think that's where, for me, the podcast was really, like, people will say, oh, you should try to retain your employees, and you should have monthly team buildings, and you should have, and it's like, okay, but what does that mean?
Yeah, break it down.
And I think that's what I enjoy about this, because as you're talking, or as I'm sharing my foolery of going, no, I still need it dummied down than that, I think this gives me an avenue to get it dummied down.
Yeah. And to know then that that's so helpful for other people, which I think is why it's grown, is that it is.
It's not because I'm the funniest person on the planet. That's not why it's grown.
Well, that too. That first.
Yes,
and then
that first.
The second reason is, no, I think it's just refreshing to hear the basic information and to be able to do that in a way that you're not outed, right? You can listen to that podcast, where we are breaking it down super simple. And we've talked about a very simple topic, and we've spent a whole episode on it because we want all of the extra fluffy content that goes into thinking about that to be honestly and thoroughly dialogued in this setting.
And I think that's the thing. Like, we're often told what we need to do, but truly how to do it. And, mm-hmm. I'll hear people say, like, even you did a podcast a couple of weeks ago that was just your top 10 list, or your, of whatever
treatment
the topic was.
I think.
Right. And there were a couple of times where I was like, but, like, I'm talking to you in my car. I'm like, but how would I? And then I was like, okay, like, I will write that down because that is unique to my, like, front desk team. Who would I? How would I? Yeah. And so I think, like,
that
list is super helpful. But then I think I'm like, okay, but that's easy for you to throw out a tip. But then how do I make that tip actually come to fruition in my office? Mm-hmm. Kind of like, again, start the oven and crack the egg.
Yeah.
Well, but how do you want me to crack this egg? Like, where am I cracking it? Is there an egg cracker? Like, it sounds stupid, but there are a lot of things like that we're going, I don't really know the how, and I think I've assumed I knew how. And so I think that's what my guess would be as to why people listen, mm-hmm. besides, how delightful we are.
Besides your hilariousness.
Besides how soothing your voice is and how smart you are. But I think it's because we really do kind of try to get in all the background stuff. Because I think that for me, same thing. It's like, well, I know that's how the veneer is supposed to happen, but how do I make sure that I can't control the bleeding, and like, does this person not have the bleeding problem? Like, am I the only one? So does that come down to burrs? Is that my assistant? Is it, so you don't get into all of that when it's just, here's what you should be doing.
Yeah, exactly. And again, I think there's plenty of technique type podcasts out there, very quickly, how do you do this, and this, and I think those are going to be super helpful for those quick tasks that need to be done. But I think the topics that we talk about, even treatment acceptance a couple weeks ago, like, yeah, there's a great list, but that's 100% technique. Like, there's gray around that really needs to be dialogued to fully understand.
And so many factors that contribute. Like, we all know your staff needs to have verbiage. Great. Duh. I knew that. What does that mean? And
now
how?
What?
And that person, I can't even understand what she says to me. And now she's the one who has to go talk to that person. Well, no wonder we're not treatment accepting. Like, what can I do about this? You know what I mean? Like, okay, so we talked about why the podcast, and do you think you hit that? Where do you want this podcast to go?
I think that's the big question, because topically, I'm always surprised that we can get in here every week and there's always something to talk about. Or there's something that we've talked about before, but we just nicked the surface of it. And I feel like we need to go back and dive in more fully. And so by this point, I thought, quite honestly, 104 episodes in, that we'd be like, we're out of topics. And I'm always surprised that we're not out of topics. And I think that shows that the field is constantly changing. The problems are new. And so I don't know, maybe we'll come to a point where we're like, we got nothing to talk about. And I keep waiting for that to happen, and knowing that even if we hit that point, we've got a podcast that will live on. Right? Even if we stopped recording today, there's 104 episodes that are useful, valuable, and will continue to be listened to going forward, which is really cool to think about, that we've almost like created this. It's almost kind of like writing a book. That book now exists out there, and ultimately we've got a podcast that will continue to kind of live on past this. So I don't know. I'd like to say that we're gonna continue as long as we can, and that it will continue to be useful, but I don't necessarily have a vision for what I want it to become, because I feel like it's achieved, honestly, beyond what I thought it would achieve. So what about for you, though?
Again, I agree with you, going, how do we still have stuff to talk about? And yet I think that's my favorite part of this whole dialoguing, though, is that we come in here, because when we first started season 1, you did have a list of things, and we've long abandoned that list because it's very real. Because we come in here, I'm like, what have you been dealing with in your practice? Or like a few weeks ago, I talked about the sensor missing. Like, what foolery, right? Yeah. But that was happening in my real world, and I think it gave me... it was one silver lining for me to go, you know what, like, this foolery happened to me on my watch because of my mistakes and my whatever, but if I can help give anybody else a nugget to say, hey guys, like, this is something that, seems like it could never happen, but yet it did, and here we are. And so I think that's, for me, it's very, rewarding, but also I learned so much from when you come in and I'm like, what has been going on with your clients? And pretty much every time I'm like, oh, thank God it's not just me. Because it might be something that, has happened in my world, but it just hasn't, it's not the most foolish thing that's happened to me that week, but it is something that has happened. And so then I can be like, yes, me too. I've kind of been thinking about that. It's just been further back in my mind. And I think it really helps me be proactive.
Yeah.
In that case, to dialogue. So I think, to me, the very real nature of this, that we all are going through and will continue to go through, we all have our own lens and our own flavor and spin to it, but at the core, it's something that can be helpful.
Yeah.
So I enjoy it just for that, because I feel like it is, it helps me get my week started off well, knowing that we've dialogued and it's not just me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, that's exciting. I feel like, I always love, this is the second time now that we've come to this anniversary episode, and it feels very exciting that we've made it here, and a sense of accomplishment. And it's nice to kind of reflect back and to look at what we've accomplished. And for all of our listeners out there, we just can't tell you how much, every time we come in here, we're thinking about you guys and really hoping that we're creating content that's super relevant and helpful. And it seems the feedback that we're getting says that it is, but we're really thankful for you guys. So thanks for hanging with us these 2 years.
Yeah, well, I think the biggest accomplishment is you tolerating my babble for 2 years. That's like, look at you. Are you going to still be here next year? Or are you going to be like, I'm done? Cuckoo bird, you're on your own.
No, many people want to meet the cuckoo bird, so
That's weird. That's weird.
And he start dragging you along to client meetings. Here she is.
I will disappoint like no other. So we'll leave it like this mysterious figure. Leave her in the closet.
The topics can go out. Leave Kuba in the closet.
Yeah.
Thanks for joining the conversation today. We hope that you are comforted in knowing that you are not alone. But we also hope that you're walking away with some really great tips and tricks to try in your practice. We value your feedback, so please take a few moments to rate and review the podcast. Finally, we want to make sure that we're covering the topics that matter to you. So track us down on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, and let us know what topics you want us to cover. As always, please know that we are rooting for you today as you manage your dental drama.